Hello everyone and welcome to the latest Blood Red podcast from Liverpool Echo. I'm Joe Rimmer and I'm joined today by Keifer, MacDonald and Beth Lindop to talk another big win for Liverpool in what is a very, very weird season, isn't it? I mean, a 6-1 win to add to a 7-0, a 7-1, a 9-0 in a season which Liverpool are still sitting in 8th in the Premier League table. But there you go, it all clicked to last night, didn't it, Keifer? You were there. A very positive performance in what's been a very strange season.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you've hit the nail on the head there with all the different score lines, and I think that's probably the bit of kind of optimism you can take going into next season is that obviously there has been inconsistencies, especially away from home, but when it's mattered, but they've still shown big performances. Obviously, I know one of those was against Rangers, and so for that, obviously they've beaten City, they've beaten United, beaten Spurs away from home. They have got some big wins under their belts, and I was saying to someone the other day that it's almost. If you think of where Liverpool were a few years ago, and they try to make that next step in kind of the early Klopp years, it was always kind of against the big teams. That was their downfall. Yeah. So I think if you kind of have the number of those top 6 teams, I think Dom King put something out last week that said Liverpool were like head of the mini league, the top 6-7 clubs this season. So we all know it's been poor away from home, and obviously defeats at Bournemouth and Forest and those kind of games have obviously ultimately been Liverpool's downfall. But I think showing what they can do on the day still, it makes it look like an easier task to kind of rectify next year. If you can, just be a bit more disciplined on the road and, kind of eliminate those silly mistakes and, all those defeats really, like the Forest, the Bournemouth games, they all seem to follow the same blueprint. I think if you can iron that out next season, there is plenty to go at, and I think last night showed it.
Yeah, that is the frustrating part, isn't it? This season, I think back to the United game and I was away at the time and just getting updates on my phone, so I didn't see that game, but at the time, when it's 7-0 against United, I thought, well, Liverpool will bounce into the top 4 from here. I think at that point they weren't too far away. And then, of course, the next week against Bournemouth, they stunk really, didn't they? They really struggled. And obviously they play Forest next, albeit at home. But how do you go about solving a problem of consistency like Liverpool have?
I think it's really hard, and I think it's quite telling that Jurgen Klopp post-match yesterday was asked, what has been the problem this season, why have Liverpool been so inconsistent, and he couldn't say. And I think that moment in the 92nd minute, whenever it was, when those 4 players just converged around a Leeds player and battled for the ball back, and you saw Jurgen Klopp's reaction, he was just slumped down into his chair, sort of completely euphoric, as if he was saying, where's this team been all season? And I think that was telling as well. It sort of shows that the manager probably doesn't even know what the problem has been this season, and I think that's been the biggest issue. If you have one sort of glaring problem or one player that's really letting you down, then you can maybe change things a little bit, but because the drop off in form has been all over the pitch, so many different positions, I also think mentality has been huge. I really, really do. I do question how much missing out on a league title by a single point, then missing out in the Champions League final has affected them. Because there must be an element sometimes as a player when you've missed out twice by a single point, you think, what's the point?
Yeah.
It must be so demoralising. I think Arsenal are probably experiencing that a little bit now up against the relentlessness of Manchester City. So, I think Klopp alluded to it. He doesn't really know what the one sort of key ingredient that's been missing this season is. But I think, as Keifer said, it's reassuring to know that Liverpool do still have these big performances in them, and I think that second half against Arsenal perhaps will even do Liverpool more good than that 7-0 against United, because the manner in which they responded to adversity, we've just not seen that at all this season, and they showed they could go toe-to-toe with the best in the league. And I still think that they can. I think, as you said, it's just the consistency, and if they can address that next season, which you'd like to think if they bring in some midfield reinforcements, that will help in the summer. But some positive signs, but also sort of very cautious optimism, because we've had a few false dawns this season, and you've just got to hope against Nottingham Forest they continue in the same vein. Yeah,
Beth makes a good point there, doesn't she, Keifer, in the sense that you think about the United game, and it was a good game. They swaggered, didn't they, to that result, and Bournemouth, the 9-0, and perhaps Rangers as well, was one of those occasions where they played a team that just fell apart, and every chance that they had went in. But even last night and the second half against Arsenal, and last night there was a battling quality, wasn't there, about the win. Responded to going, to Leeds pulling a goal back and immediately pulling away again. That I don't think has been present in this Liverpool team all too often this season.
No, absolutely. And I think there was a period midway through the first half, I think maybe about 20-25 minutes, and Liverpool missed a few chances, and you wonder if the heads are going to go down. And as I say, that's kind of been the story of their season on the road, really. So, I think Leeds obviously it was a noisy crowd at Ellen Road, and I think obviously they're fighting for their lives. So you may be thinking, are they going to be able to stand up and kind of let their quality shine through, or is it going to, got these chances going to come back and haunt them? But they kind of stuck to their guns and stuck to their principles, and kind of reminded themselves who they were, kind of thing. And in the end, obviously the golfing class was telling, and probably could have been more than 6 on the night. But 20-25 minutes gone, you're thinking you probably take a 1-0 here and everyone just get out of here. But I think, and then you see in the second half, obviously players like Curtis Jones, Cody Gakpo, and even Jota. Confidence is rife, and that spreads through the team. And Jota, for the struggles he's had, and I know he's been injured for such a large period over the last 12 months, but to take that second goal first time just kind of shows how confident he was. Jones to play that ball through to him for the first goal, to take it off Gakpo's toes, and that's just stuff that we haven't seen, not from Curtis Jones individually, but there's kind of risks and playing on the edge, which at times it's felt a bit safe this season. No one's really wanted to step up and kind of take that mantle, and as we both just said then, the quality is there. It's just a case of, for whatever reason it's been this season, that it's not been, they have done themselves a disservice in that sense. And I kind of echo what Beth says in terms of the mentality. I think it must be so hard, to go from competing for Champions Leagues, European titles over the past 4 or 5 years, and don't get me wrong, obviously they'll want to be playing in the Champions League as much as anyone next season, but between now, say, the beginning of March after they lost that first leg against Madrid, to know that at best you're going to finish in the top 4, that must be quite an ego bruiser. And obviously, as people say, they're footballers, they're paid thousands, they should want to win every game, but at the end of the day they are humans, and it must be quite hard to get yourself up for that. And when you are beating United and then losing to Bournemouth, you would have taken a 1-0 win over United, a 1-0 win over Bournemouth, you get more points for that, you don't get any more for scoring 7 goals. So there's just, I think it's the little things you're looking for with Liverpool at the moment, as you say, those kind of battling qualities, because we all know that they can score goals and blow teams off the park, but it's those kind of subtle kind of issues that have been their downfall, where maybe we haven't seen too often this campaign.
We're looking for signs, aren't we? We're looking for signs for next season that it'll all be okay, and with a couple of signings. And one sign, I think, in the last, and look, I don't want to get too overexcited because it's been a game and a half essentially, but Trent moving into that midfield role just feels like it's not only lit a fire under him, but it's given him a new lease of life. It's taken away the critics that can just criticise his defending, and given Liverpool an extra dimension, hasn't it?
It really has, and there's been an argument for him to move into midfield for quite some time, and as I said on the pod the other week, I've always been of the argument of, if it's not broke, don't fix it, and he's obviously helped Liverpool win everything there is to win from right back. So, and I've always thought that his defensive flaws were sort of exaggerated by rival fans a little bit. Before this season, of course he has a mistake in him, but so does 90% of the defenders in the league. He's not on his own in that. But I think this season, whether it is confidence, whether it is fatigue, he has been poor. He has left Liverpool exposed on a number of occasions. And as you say, last night it did sort of just look like he had a new lease of life, and he had his swagger back as well. I mean, the way he took that ball and played it over the top for Núñez for the 6th goal was just stunning, and I think he completed the most passes or the second most passes of any player in the Premier League this season. 91% passing accuracy, which is absurd when you consider how much he was on the ball.
And the type of passes he's playing as well.
Exactly.
They were risky passes, weren't they?
But again, that you say risky there, that comes from having the confidence to play those passes, and he only really found that confidence once Liverpool had sort of clicked into gear a little bit, and I think it just shows you how much having a bit of confidence, having that mentality and that belief that you're going to go on and win the game and dominate your opponent, how much that impacts the way you play. And it's interesting because he's not fully moved into midfield. I think someone described it the other day as a right midfield back role. It's almost like in that sort of pivot holding role with Fabinho. And you do have to say Leeds were poor last night. They were really poor. And if you're a Leeds United fan, you are fearing for them after that performance. Shipping 11 goals.
To be fair, I think they started well enough. Yeah. They had better. I wouldn't say they called them chances, but certainly better breakaways, a couple of shots early doors. But once Liverpool got themselves in front, they did fall, and they give up chances the other way.
To ship 11 goals in 2 home games is just...
Especially against 5 and Palace.
I think the thing is as well, even like under Bielsa, they shipped goals, but you always felt that they were dangerous going the other way, whereas last night, aside from when they capitalised on that mistake from Canate, they didn't really look a threat. So, you know, Trent will undoubtedly face much bigger threats in the future, and he will be caught out if he is gambling and going a bit further forward and taking those risks. But if he's producing the sort of quality like he did last night, you can take that risk. It's worth it.
And I think we've talked all season, haven't we, about Liverpool being a bit predictable and people knowing what you get from Liverpool, and it feels like Klopp, like you say, like by moving him to midfield without moving him to midfield, has made Liverpool, given them a new element, made them a little bit more unpredictable. And I think you're absolutely right. You know, it drives me mad, the whole Trent defensive debate, because I think the way we watch football now is everything's in absolutes, isn't it? I find it fascinating at the moment that Van Dijk has gone from the best in the world ever, no one could ever get near him, to the absolute worst. His drop off so big, and I think, well, Liverpool have dropped off. He's getting older. He's not going to be the same player he was, but that doesn't take away from his brilliance. And Van Dijk's brilliance doesn't take away from Vidic's brilliance or Terry's brilliance. They were all brilliant players in different teams, and the teams make the player as much as the player makes the team. So, you know, I do think this debate about Trent has been, it almost feels forced at times. It's like the talking point to have after games, and you know, I think back to fullbacks. All defenders make mistakes, and you know, that's how goals are scored in football, aren't they? So I think it was just a bit tired, but I'm really glad. If you know, that was the most I've seen Trent last night look up for a game. There's been times this season where he hasn't really looked up for it. Like the criticism has got to him a little bit. Like he looks a bit bitter or embattled a little bit. But last night he seemed up for it. He seemed to be enjoying himself. But do you see that going forward, Keifer, is the blueprint for Liverpool, certainly for the rest of the season, but perhaps going into next season?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, especially if top four now, you know, it is as good as gone, I would think. So, you know, you've got 8 or 9 games left to kind of just try something different, and obviously that's what they've done in the last 2 games, and it's kind of the same as Beth. I've always been one of those of, well, what's the need? Liverpool won every single trophy available with Trent fullback, and it's not like he's been a bit part player. He's been the nucleus of everything they've done so well. So it's, you know, why would you take such a huge gamble? And I think Southgate tried it a few times for England, and Klopp was quite vocal in, you know, why would you move him kind of thing. But I think obviously, as you say, that's a big kind of buzzword at Liverpool at the moment, isn't it? You know, under Pep Linders, he obviously loves his unpredictability and stuff like that. So, you know, adding that extra dimension, because speaking to someone last night, and I was saying, you know, as much as, you know, Liverpool's A game is, you know, when they're on their A game, no one can get close to them, and we've seen that. But my biggest kind of criticism has probably been, and you could probably say in the lockdown season as well, is that, you know, when things aren't going Liverpool's way, they're very stubborn. You know, they don't change much. Yeah. So, you know, it took them 6 home defeats at Anfield in 2021 to drop the line 10 yards deeper when everyone could see that for weeks. And, you know, it was only the final 10 games of the season that they became hard to beat again and got a run together. And you could probably argue the same at times this season when there's been so many false dawns, and you think, you know, even after the World Cup, it was, you know, right, this season is good as a write-off, you know, take top 4 and run. And it was just the same kind of, you know, playing away from home with such a high line, you just think you're just asking for trouble. But, you know, this obviously is a subtle change, it's not a huge one. I mean, Henderson, you know, has covered him for the best part of 5 years on that right-hand side, and Konate has obviously kind of done that as well since he's come. But I think in terms of what it gives Trent, that freedom. But, I mean, going forward, I mean, obviously people have said, haven't they, you know, start him as an outright 6 next season, which I'm not sure I'm on board with. I think it was Gary Neville said something after the Arsenal game along the lines of, you know, I know he played as a midfielder during his academy days, but, you know, you look at the midfielders and the technical ability in the Premier League now in terms of your Rodris and your Bernardo Silvas and how good they are with the ball. I don't think you can just have the arrogance to throw a full-back in there and expect him. You know, you got to think when Trent gets the ball at the moment, he's got the whole pitch, you know, in his view, hasn't he?
My argument would be, would he get the space?
Time
that even in the position he's now playing in, which is moving in central areas. Yeah. But by shifting him in there, he comes into space, doesn't he? Yeah. Whereas if you put him in there from the start,
he's going to be coming out to try and get the space. Yeah,
exactly.
I mean, you take Henderson for an example, and kind of, you know, in his pomp 2019, whatever, he would always come to that right hand side to get the ball off one of the centre halves, and it's, you know, it's such a tight area. You're probably playing on 1 or 2 touch, which you know, obviously Trent can do, but he's best when he gets the ball out of his feet. And I think as well, as we saw last night for the first goal, I think that right kind of half channel is his best space in terms of, you know, he can get his head up. Is that kind of Beckham-esque, you know, clip into the box, which is kind of his trademark. So I think to move him entirely would be a bit wild and not something I would be keen to see. But I think, you know, if you can kind of, I think in reality what it is it's just minimising his flaws, and it's just offering that protection, which he obviously hasn't had over the last 18 months and kind of just getting his confidence back and saying, look, we're going to build you this platform because he is a generational talent. We're going to give you this platform to go and go forward and wreak havoc, and that's kind of what he's done in the in the 1.5 games that we've seen. So if you think if they can get some proper legs in there next season with some good midfielders, it's there's plenty to kind of be optimistic about.
Yeah, Keifer talks about protecting Trent there. I think one of the things that I've spotted is the aggressive nature in which Konate plays and him coming out to that right. I mean, I know he made a mistake last night, and I kind of think that can happen, but I thought he was ever so good again last night after Arsenal.
Yeah, he's been one of the best players this season, and I think probably one of Liverpool's downfalls has been that he's not been fit for a lot of the season. So I think he's definitely first choice centre back alongside Virgil van Dijk. Exceptional talent, obviously young, got such a high ceiling, especially as a centre back. He's 23, is he?
Yeah.
Which a lot of centre backs don't hit the peak until 25, 26, 27.
Van Dijk was even older, wasn't he?
Yeah, exactly. And you think a few more years playing in the Premier League and playing alongside players like Van Dijk, the experience he's going to gain. His ceiling is so high. He's already played in a World Cup final and a Champions League final. And as you say, I thought he was tremendous last night. I mean, that moment when he gave the ball away, you're just sort of thinking, not again, Liverpool, aren't you? It's just doing the absolute damnedest to sort of blow up all of the hard work. But yeah, I thought he was good again last night. But he was exceptional in that second half against Arsenal. When he went absolutely clattering in on Granit Xhaka. It's probably one of the moments of the match for me. So he's a top talent, and I think if Liverpool can keep him fit and maybe bring in another top class centre back as well, if Virgil does indeed sort of decline a little bit as he gets older, which as you say is only natural. Then they've got a formidable sort of centre back there for the next decade or so. Yeah,
it's the way he plays with aggression that I think Van Dijk's quite laid back in the way he plays, and he goes and wins things, and he did that when Liverpool were really at their peak. But to see Konate go in there, winning headers, leading, winning tackles, and he made a mistake. But what was impressive is that he just made that mistake and just carried on and he didn't fall apart. He didn't let him get to him. He just carried on, and I thought that was great. Another player who there's been a lot of talk about last night was Diogo Jota. Keifer. I mean, Carragher said he would have sold him after half an hour. I probably would have sold him after 5 minutes, but he didn't half come back. Played well in the second half, pressed well, took his goals incredibly well. Although one former Echo employee described it as a Joe Rimmer shitty, his finish. But I would have taken that any day of the week. I mean, he's an odd player, isn't he, Jota? I can't get my head around him. Sometimes I just don't want him in the team, but when Liverpool are functioning and they're scoring goals and they're moving well, he just pops up, doesn't he? And he scores good goals, and he's a good player in a good team, if that makes sense.
Yeah, 100%. In a weird way, I'd probably compare him to Haaland and kind of all the noise that you get at the minute with him in terms of, he scored 21 goals last season and he was on the bench for the Champions League final.